Wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.
Yep, it's the world's most dangerous morning show, The Breakfast Club. Charlamagne the God, Angela Yee, and we have another individual who is running for Manhattan DA. He goes by the name of Alvin Bragg. What's up, brother?
Doing well. How you doing?
I'm blessed, black, and highly favored, sir.
I love it.
How you feeling about your chances, man?
I feel good.
Okay.
I feel good. You know?
Everybody's been hitting me up about Alvin. When I tell, and it's not even recent. It's been for the longest. So we've been trying to get you up here.
I'm happy to be here. We got a lot of mutual friends, a lot of good people.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about, this is one debate that's been going on in politics in general, experience versus somebody that is from the outside and is not involved in politics prior to running for a position. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think for DA, I bring both. I've got the experience of both having done the work, but not in the DA's office, right?
Mm-hmm.
I did the work as a federal prosecutor, did the work in the New York State Attorney General's office, but never run for office before, so I'm new to that. I'm not a politician, and I didn't come up in the DA's office, which has done so many cases that have, led to mass incarceration. And I'm born and bred in Harlem. I have the most experience in what I think matters the most, which is, before I was 21, I had a gun pointed at me 6 times, 3 by the police, 3 by people who weren't the police. I've done and seen just about everything, good and bad, that Harlem has to offer.
What would you say is the biggest issues within our community?
I think the biggest issues are, really, I just start with those 6 gunpoint stops. 3 of them were by the police, and I think we've got to work on police accountability. I'm doing that, representing Eric Garner's mother now in the case. But the 3 were people who weren't police officers, and so I think the gun violence, I had, within 12 hours of the day, two shootouts 2 blocks from me. So I think gun violence and police accountability are the biggest things in our community.
How do you curb gun violence? I always like to ask politicians this question. How do you curb gun violence?
Yeah, well, I worked on this at the Attorney General's office.
Stop and frisk. I saw you worked on the stop and frisk practices.
Well, so that's the flip side of it. So that's how we don't.
Right.
So stop and frisk was not the answer. So we pushed back on that. We did a study. We looked at all the stops from a 4-year period and showed that 0.1% of all the humans stopped, those cases resulted in a conviction for a gun offense. That's such a low number, and as someone who's been stopped, I'm sure I got company in that here. It's just not effective. But what we did, which we think is effective, we looked at every gun found at a crime scene in the state of New York, and we traced it back to its last lawful sale from a firearm dealer. And it's a blueprint for what we should be doing. That's what I would do as DA. There are people sitting far, far away from Manhattan, profiting off of our pain, flooding us with guns. And that's the kind of prosecution I've done throughout my career. You follow the money, and without fail, it takes you to the most culpable people. You hold them accountable. You get safety on our streets. That's what I've done.
But some would say, and I'm one of those sums, that in order to curb gun violence, you got to put more resources and opportunity into these communities.
Oh, I definitely agree with that too. And I've done that in my personal life. I'm a Sunday school teacher. I'm a little league coach. That's how I came up. My mom was a career educator. My dad ran homeless shelters. So that's definitely part. I'm an all of the above kind of guy. Like we need to stop the guns from flowing in. We need the investment in our community. We need our community interrupters, our cure violence folks. We need all of it. But what we don't need is more stop and frisk.
Right. Now, I wanted to talk to you about Harvey Weinstein. You were also involved in that very high-profile case. So can you break that down for us too?
Yeah, so this is to me one of the biggest shortcomings of the DA's office, not bringing a prosecution when Harvey was on tape admitting to a sexual assault. So we at the Attorney General's office went forward with a case against him as like an employer, a hostile work environment in his job. And it was really sobering work. I helped build that team, helped do the case. The things he was doing at his workplace were horrific. So we brought that case, and I left the Attorney General's office. We had a transition in Attorney General's before it was resolved, but I was really proud to bring that case and lead the team to do the investigations and some of the interviews we were doing of the employees. The stuff he was asking them to do, clean up after him after he had sex. Disgusting stuff.
How long ago was this?
We brought the suit in I think 2018, and it was in between the period when the DA didn't prosecute him, and then the second time when he did prosecute him. And it was disgusting stuff. He was preying on. He was hiring women to basically help him recruit women, who would approach as models, who he would then hit on. It was disgusting stuff.
What are your plans on ending mass incarceration?
Well, we're going to shrink the system. I know from growing up, and from the data, we have so many cases that just don't have anything to do with public safety. More than 80% of the cases in the city are misdemeanors or below. And of that universe, and y'all know this already, it's not going to surprise y'all, more than 80% of the people accused are people of color. So we're going to shrink that. There's so many cases that don't deal with public safety. I've got a list on my website, disorderly conduct, standalone resisting arrest. I've always wondered about that. Well, what was the arrest that was resisted? What's that charge? Oh, no, it's just resisting arrest. That makes no sense to me.
Right.
Obstructing governmental administration. I've gotten a call in the middle of the night, more than a couple of times from friends on these kind of calls. So it's like, where you got arrested for? All I asked for was the badge number. Now I'm in jail. So I have a bunch of types of cases that we're not going to bring. And then, I mentioned, my dad ran homeless shelters. We're not going to criminalize poverty. One of the worst cases, I think, out of this DA's office, was they prosecuted a homeless person for using one counterfeit bill to buy food and toothpaste, and they recommended a sentence of 5 to 10 years for that person.
Come on, man.
That's insane.
That's facts.
Come on, man.
That's true. That's facts.
Come on, man.
So we're just going to end all that. To me, that's not rocket science. That's just real basic.
One thing that you've also been against is corrupt politicians. So is it going to be weird for you moving into a space where you haven't been in politics before? This would be your first position as a politician, and there is so much corruption around you. So how does that feel? What made you make that decision?
So it's weird, 'cause I don't think of myself as a politician. I still think of myself just a lawyer who brings cases. I understand I'm on the ballot, so I guess that makes me a politician. But the kind of cases I've done, we're going to keep on doing them. So I prosecuted the former head of the state Senate majority leader for bribery. In that case, a council member and an upstate mayor also for bribery. Prosecuted an FBI agent for lying. Oversaw the prosecution of the mayor of Mount Vernon for campaign finance fraud. We're going to keep on doing all that stuff. Offends me so much. It's like the police cases to me, right? We pay your salary, we vote you in, or we have you hired, and then you betray our trust. To me, those are just those cases. There's just no excuse for that. People betraying the public trust. So that's high on my list. We got City Hall. Manhattan is different for so many reasons. We got City Hall. We got Wall Street, and we're going to police those spaces.
What do you think about Cuomo and all the issues that he's been having?
I worked at the Attorney General's office and closely with Cuomo's staff, and let me just say, it was always noted the difference between the tone in our office at the Attorney General's office and the tone in the governor's office. Just a different style. We weren't yelling at people in our office. I just don't think that's the way to run things. I would have calls sometimes when I was the chief deputy, right, the number 2 person in the AG's office. I would get calls from people in the AG like, hey, you got to call the governor's staff. They're yelling at us. Sometimes I call the governor's staff. They were yelling at me. I said, I don't work for you. So I just no way to get work done, right? We're out here supposed to be fighting for justice, fighting for fairness. That starts with the way you run your workplace.
I haven't heard enough conversations surrounding marijuana, right? Because it's legal in NYC, not for recreational purposes yet, is it? What is it?
Well, no, yes, they just passed the law legalizing, personal use in certain amounts, and
So shouldn't they be letting people out of jail?
So part of the package is to seal cases and to work on that. And definitely, my view has been that weed has been legal for white people like as long as I've been alive.
Yeah.
Right. You go below 96th Street and it's legal. You come up to Harlem and it's not. And so definitely cases that wouldn't be brought under the new law should certainly not be brought. Should be sealed, and then we got to look back and to dismiss all those cases. Some of that happens by operation of law under this new law. Yeah,
because we talk about the people with counterfeit bills getting 5 to 10 years. Think about brothers who got caught with a joint.
Oh.
You know what I mean, or an ounce of weed doing 5, 10 years right now for something that's currently legal. That's just ridiculous.
No doubt. And you mentioned the stop and frisk report we did earlier at the Attorney General's office. Part of that report was we looked at the marijuana prosecutions that grew out of the stops and the way they were disposed of, white people versus black people, just exactly what you said, treated completely differently.
Yep.
So yeah, it's been legal for white people for a long time, and about time that this happened.
How do you feel about reallocating resources, money, from the police to go back to communities that need it?
Yeah, I spoke out about this last summer. The budget has increased by more than $1 billion since de Blasio took over. And I mentioned my dad ran homeless shelters. That's one area where I said, look, we gotta roll this back. The people he used to work with, they know how to deal with the homeless. We don't need police officers doing that. Mental health responses. same thing, right? Police officers aren't trained to do that. We've got models around the country where other people are responding and don't need the police. And then also police in schools. To me, those are the three big areas. And I've worked on them. When I was at the Attorney General's office, we investigated a couple of school districts upstate that had these zero tolerance disciplinary policies, right? Basically, they were sending people to the police, something that, like, during my time, our time would have maybe sent us to the principal, right? Or maybe not even not. They just told you, like, sit down and learn. And so those are three areas where I think we got to shift the money, take it from the police budget, put it into the communities. And I always say, if it's something that my mom and dad could do, right? My dad ran homeless shelters. My mom was an educator. They and their people should do it, and the police shouldn't.
So what got you into politics? Because it seems like, you there's a lot of civil work going on around you, but what actually got you into politics?
Really looking at what's going on in the Manhattan District Attorney's office, and really think that we need some really fundamental change. And so it was that homeless case I talked about, the counterfeit bill, side by side with the very same office that recommended 5 to 10 years for using that counterfeit bill for toothpaste and food. The doctor at Columbia, a gynecologist who reportedly sexually assaulted dozens of patients, plea deal, no time. I was like, how are you going to have these two cases side by side? And I said, I've been working in this space for 20 years. I think I can have an impact. It's that old saying, why not me and why not now? And so I felt like I have something to offer, and think we can really do great things and change that office and make it something that has impactful positively in our community.
How many people are running for Manhattan DA?
I'm one of 8.
It's a crowded space right now.
Yes.
And so I think it'll be great for us to have some representation, though, in that space, because for the past few decades, white men as Manhattan DA. So what do you think, from a person coming from the community that you come from Harlem, that's experienced, like you said, being stopped 3 times by the police, 3 times, at gunpoint by not the police? What is it that you think that you will be bringing to a position like that?
I think you hit the nail on the head, right? So we've never had a non-white male in this job, in the history of the job.
Wow.
Which, right? I mean, that's a wow, right? I mean, that's just like, whoa, what are we doing?
I mean, not really. It's America.
Well, Harry
Until Barack Obama, we never had a president that was.
Well, Harry Belafonte, who's supporting me, we sent out a mail the other week. I thought it struck me. He said, we've had a black president, we've had a black mayor in New York. He's like, but we've never had a lead prosecutor in my home borough of Manhattan. And, Harry Belafonte's in his 90s, right? So that just struck a chord for me. But to your point, I think it's not just having a black person in the role. I think that is impactful, but it's these experiences, right? I don't know the experiences of all the white men before me who held the job.
We know that they weren't black experiences.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say they probably didn't have an AK pointed at their head like I did. Probably didn't have a homicide victim on their doorstep like I did. Probably didn't have a relative come home from incarceration and live with them for a year plus like I did. And probably, actually, I can stop saying probably. We know this didn't happen, right? And for me, the most kind of personally meaningful part is the kids. So at the beginning of the pandemic, my son, he's 11. I have an 11-year-old and a 15-year-old. He's astute, like he knows the science and all. He knows you got to wear a mask, right? And he said to me, he said, "Dad, I don't want to wear a mask. Put a mask on. What you talking about?" He said, "No, I'm afraid if I put a mask on, the police will think I'm a robber and I'll get shot."
Wow.
He's 11.
Wow.
So to me, to be able to look both my kids in the face and say, your father is in charge of safety and fairness on this island now, and obviously my kids are just sort of that pulls for me, but that's not just my biological kids. It's my Sunday school students. It's the Harlem Little League kids I've coached, and then by extension, all of our kids who can say, look, you know what, like that's the guy. If something happens, ultimately he's deciding it. That is just like profoundly meaningful to me.
How important is education? Because I know for both of us, like coming up, that's kind of what kept us out of trouble a lot. And you ended up, going to Harvard, right? So can you talk about your journey and how important you think education is for our youth right now too?
Oh, it's key. I mean, so my mom, was an educator. She was a math teacher. She's passed, right? So I've been thinking about it a lot. I've actually been out on the streets a lot campaigning, and have people come up to me and say, are you her son? She taught me, right? And I can remember, riding a bus to school with her with multiplication tables, quizzing me. I hated it at the time. But you're right. That was the key. That was the ticket. And I always talk about my favorite book is the autobiography of Frederick Douglass. And I love the part. Oh man, right? I love the part where he's tricking the white kids into teaching them how to read. And I talk to anyone who says, and I'm sure we've all faced this, when folks are like, oh, trying to associate education with whiteness, and it's like, no, man, like he was literally risking his life to learn how to read, and we need the investment in our communities. We need more, but we've got avenues now that obviously he didn't have, and that's where it is. I'm big on the classic education, but then also these other youth enrichment activities like sports or like arts, where you get the kids in that way, and then you can teach them life experiences and things. So I think both are so key.
How did you know you wanted to be a lawyer?
Really, it was those 6 gunpoint experiences. After the first one, was on my corner on 139th and Adam Clayton Powell. I mean, I'd be lying to y'all if I would I could talk about it calmly now. But
a lot of trauma.
Oh man, I mean, I went home, I wanted to crawl on the bed, but my parents were like, all right, this is what we're going to do. We're going to call your minister, we're going to call the city council member, and I filed a complaint, came downtown, and I remember sitting in a little dark room where I was filing a complaint, and I was like, well, if this is where they sit you when you're filing a complaint, what do they do to you when they arrest you? And really from that moment, I got really interested in criminal justice and interested in being a lawyer, and so that I put it back to that moment.
The autobiography of Freddie Douglass is great. You know who gave me that book? Ebony Williams. Ebony gave me that book like 2 years ago as a gift.
Oh, we had to read that book in school so many things. Now, what about people who don't like prosecutors?
Look, I get it, right? I mean, and I tell people I work with in law enforcement, I didn't go to a classic prosecutor job until I've been a lawyer for 10 years. And a lot of it was because of those early experiences. But I talk about the stuff you can do as a prosecutor, right? So, at the Attorney General's office, we prosecuted landlords who harassed tenants. We prosecuted employers who were cheating workers out of their wages. Federal prosecutor, I prosecuted FBI agent for lying. And I do think that, prosecution is part of the solution on these gun issues, right? I believe in the community reinvestment, but, so my brother-in-law had his best friend shot and killed in front of him. And I went to help him with that. He was a witness to it, and it's a longer story, but I went to help him. And I looked in his eyes, and I've never seen a blank stare like that, having seen that. So I think prosecution is a part of that. People who are, shooting and killing people in our neighborhoods, we have to hold accountable, but as part of a holistic picture. So prosecutors are part of the answer. Certainly anyone who said a prosecutor is the only answer is wrong. But working in conjunction and having a prosecutor from our communities who understands that part of the picture is investing. Part of the picture is not just reflexively prosecuting. Part of the picture is understanding that all gun cases aren't alike. My brother-in-law went to jail for a gun case for a gun that he never touched or knew happened. He was, his friend had it. They arrested him all together. That's a bad case. Right. We shouldn't do that. So,
that happens all the time, though.
Oh, yeah.
Especially in our community. Like, especially if you get pulled over and somebody don't claim this gun. And I've seen people claim the gun and they still take all of us to jail for the same weapon.
Oh, his was a schoolyard fist fight, about 5 boys. They arrested each of them, and one of them had the gun on him. And they said, all right, well, that's all your gun.
That don't make no sense.
Right. So we need someone from our communities who knows what's really public safety, right? Like, versus what's, okay, that's a bad case. Like, what are we doing? And I obviously lived the impacts of that in my life, right? Because he was incarcerated, and then came and lived with me afterwards, and also saw what the system doesn't do, right? They didn't address the trauma of him having witnessed his best friend murdered in front of him, the trauma of him having been in solitary confinement. They didn't care about where he lived or what job he did. And I think we need a prosecutor who's had those experiences. Like, all right, look, I know true public safety from a bad case, and I also know that we got to support people when they come home. So I think that goes back to your question about having a prosecutor from our community.
How'd you deal with your trauma? Being, having guns pulled on you 6 different times. Did you go to therapy? Like, what'd you do?
First of all, thank you for asking. I packed it away. Like I think, unfortunately, so many of us have done. And one thing about this campaign has been, this is the first time I've talked about it. And it's been, I think, important for me. I mean, it's obviously not like traditional therapy, but I hadn't talked about it and really hadn't connected a lot of the dots myself on it. Just kind of packed it away and kept it moving because it was a part of life. And I think it's important. I was at a actually with community interrupters on 145th Street, Street Corner Resources, and I asked it was mostly young black men. I asked them, I said, who here has been stopped? And everyone raised their hand. And then this young man started talking about how every time he sees the police, he has a pit in his stomach. That's and right. How that made him feel like basically some kind of way, right? And you could tell he was talking about it out loud for the first time, but everyone was nodding like, yeah, man, like, I feel that way too. Like, that's normal. And so I think we just have to have these conversations more and say, look, these are experiences, but one, they're joined experiences that happen to a lot of us. And the more we talk about it and get those emotions out. So I didn't run for that purpose, obviously, but it's been something for me that in talking about it, I feel like it's helped me and it helped a lot of other people be like, yeah, that happened to me too.
It's so normalized. That really sucks that it feels like it's just part of what it is, like that we have to deal with. And that shouldn't be that way.
Yeah, I'm a big advocate for therapy. And that's why when you said about your brother witnessing a murder and they didn't try to do anything to help him deal with the trauma that he would have experienced. Like, I feel like all of that has to be a part of the whole process.
Yeah. And we don't, I mean, I don't know about y'all's families, but coming up, we didn't talk about mental health in my family. Because it wasn't part of the conversation. And I'll be real, like, in the moment, we were more worried about posting bail. We were more worried about him coming home. We were more worried about the case. We were more worried about him surviving that. And there were things that we didn't talk about, like solitary confinement, to really years later. I don't want to speak for him, but I know for me and my experiences, which weren't as acute as his, that talking about it and getting it out, and I've checked with him before talking about this on the campaign trail. I think it's just important for me personally, but for all of us, just to tell our stories, tell our narratives, and pair that with the injustice. Right, this should not be normalized. Right. The fact that I could ask a whole room of 15 to 24-year-old young black people if they've ever been stopped, and every single man raises his hand, like, that's a problem.
You think police unions have too much power, and how do we stop that?
Yes, they have too much power, but I think it is waning. I think we have seen, for example, I think in this DA's race, 7 out of 8, I don't know how many. I'm not taking union money or union support from the police unions, and I think we only had 2 candidates who sought it. So that's a pretty big shift right there. They have also, we also saw in the last cycle, I think their endorsement of Trump really struck a chord for people in Manhattan who didn't know. They're like, wait, what is this union again? So we've got to, they stand as a barrier to reform at every turn, whether it's qualified immunity, whether it's when you can interview an officer after a shooting. They stand at, and I think we just got to keep on calling it out and saying, look, when we look at those union contracts, calling on leadership to negotiate different things and saying, look, these kind of safeguards and things. I'm pro union. I'm supported by the teachers union. I'm supported by healthcare, 1199. So I believe in unions, but the unions that have endorsed me are fighting for social justice change. The police union is fighting tooth and nail at every turn against reform.
Word.
All right. Well, I want to make sure everybody goes out and votes. Again, it's ranked choice voting for the mayor, but for you guys, there's 8 of you running. You pick one person.
That's right.
For Manhattan DA.
Ms. Alvin Bragg, if you're running for Manhattan DA, elections are today. Because we airing this tomorrow. Elections are today. Alvin Bragg, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure.
I've listened to y'all for a long time, so it's been a privilege to be here. I appreciate it.
Thank you, brother. It's the Breakfast Club.